There's a moment right at the start of Watchmen where you genuinely think, maybe he can do it. Maybe Zack Snyder really understands the assignment. You believe he's pulling off the impossible and adapting Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen into a movie that isn't crushed under the weight of its own mythology. And that moment lasts for exactly 5 minutes and 32 seconds.
You sound bitter.
Me? Bitter? No. I think it's hilarious.
We've spoken a lot about Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' groundbreaking 12-issue DC comic book turned bane of Moore's existence on this channel before, so we'll keep the catch-up brief. In 1986, Moore and Gibbons created one of the most thoughtful and pointed series about what comic books could be and how the medium could tell them, all under the umbrella of a murder mystery involving superheroes and politics. Moore eventually fell out with DC, partly due in part to the series, and distanced himself from the books, giving all licensing and option money to Gibbons. After several false starts trying to get the film made, Zack Snyder was given the keys to the kingdom, thanks largely in part to successful turns with other beloved IPs like George Romero's Dawn of the Dead and Frank Miller's 300. Snyder had shown an immense aptitude for relaying information visually and not just having characters stand around spewing exposition.
This is Sparta!
One of the director's best tools for doing that is the needle drop montage, used here as the opening credits. Before a single line of dialogue is even spoken, the director gives us a 50-year alternate Earth history lesson. Now that shouldn't work, but it does, because Snyder isn't starting from scratch. He's cleverly rewritten beats and moments we already know. When the credits first begin to roll, Snyder goes as far as including winking Easter eggs to Batman. As Night Owl, our resident non-superpowered gadget guy, is clocking an armed gunman in front of a theater with two characters who look suspiciously close to Martha and Thomas Wayne. Fixed to the brick wall behind them, we see Batman posters as the cameras flash and the pistol fires off in ultra slow motion. Slow motion would become a staple in Snyder's vision, often used to accentuate moments of drama for characters. But here, his purpose is to let the view have the world wash over them, and slow-mo isn't for the characters, it's for us. Snyder shot much of this section at extremely high frame rates, giving every image incredible clarity and depth, and this is slow motion used with intention, not a style for style's sake. Every frame feels like a painting, not just visually, narratively. You could pause anywhere in this montage and find a story, because these are hyper-specific tableaus. Each slow motion beat isn't just filler, it's a fully realized moment from the world's alternate timeline. When we watch the Minutemen taking the famous posed photograph, it's framed as a moment of prosperity, something to be held onto as a time when the world changed for the better. There's an earnestness and optimism that imbues the first few shorts. When we see the Silk Spectre-inspired pin-up paintings along bombers, followed by Silhouette kissing the nurse in the VJ Day photo, we aren't looking at references just to do it. These are pieces of narrative shorthand. Snyder is giving us what amounts to a crash course in the entire history of this world. We're seeing how the Minutemen not only inspired the troops, we see them actively taking part. He does all this in under 5 minutes, all without outright shouting it to us in some long info dump about the rise and fall of superheroes.
You understand, don't you?
I understand.
Instead of that, we get America's Troubadour and Bob Dylan singing The Times They Are Changin'. That song turns the montage into a kind of funeral procession for America's loss of innocence, and a chronicle of how costumed heroes both shaped and failed to shape the world. Because even when they were succeeding, how great was it? When we see Silk Spectre posing in front of the cameras holding a newspaper, immensely proud of what she's done, we also see the leering men around her, a fact that plagues her throughout the entire story. As the song progresses, we see the hero's downfall, their deaths and their failures. When the opening pivots from the Minutemen to the Watchmen, the first new character we meet is Walter Kovacs, who would later become Rorschach. Just in this still, we are overloaded with information. A young, angry boy choosing to stand in that anger and face the dark world around him. Dylan's lyrics become a metronome for time passing, and Snyder syncs his transitions to the structure of the song itself. The result feels like a living history book, a world building itself right in front of our eyes. It feels like the start of something bold, and most disappointingly, it feels nothing like the rest of the movie. What makes this sequence so brilliant is that it adapts Watchmen by expanding it, not copying it. The comic book doesn't really show many of these moments directly. They're implied in dialogue, hinted at in back matter, or referenced in passing. Snyder pulls those references out and transforms them into cinematic scenes that build context without needing dialogue. For these 5 minutes, Zack Snyder is not just adapting Watchmen, he's remembering how it impacted him when he read the material. Snyder believes that in the world Moore and Gibbons built, some groovy gravy hippie is going to be shot because of their love for peace. Screenwriter Alex Garland famously commented,
"I will make a dream of the book."
in regards to his adaptation of Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation. The result was controversial with a lot of folks, particularly the author, but there's no denying it was Garland's idea of Annihilation, just as this montage is Snyder's idea of The Watchmen. And then, Snyder just stopped speaking. Once the opening ends, we shift into Rorschach's investigation of the comedian's murder. Now, this is a great scene in the comic, but Snyder's version doesn't translate the same way, because suddenly, the movie becomes obsessed with mimicking the comic panel for panel. And this is where the film starts to feel weirdly inert. Because the more literally you adapt Watchmen, the more you start to highlight what doesn't work in a one-to-one transition. On the page, the text is stylized, rhythmic, purposefully overwritten, and in a movie, spoken out loud, it feels stiff and artificial.
Is that guy in the space rocket? Is that Jesus?
The comic famously uses structure, its layout, its pacing, its mirroring of itself to build themes visually. A movie is a different medium. You can't replicate that structure without altering what it's like to watch a movie. While that may be the intent of some filmmakers like David Lynch, it is not Snyder's. The film ends up feeling like watching storyboards come to life rather than an interpretation with purpose. Which kind of works for Robert Rodriguez's Sin City, but that was a book built on style, not so much thoughtful intent, other than homaging Miller's love of pulp. The behind-the-scenes process of creating the opening reveals why it works so well and why the rest of the movie struggles to match it. They built it like a series of paintings. Snyder and production designer Alex McDowell approached each shot like a standalone illustration. They storyboarded each moment, reproduced period-accurate sets, and filled them with real extras to look like a painting come to life, because that was always the intent. There are references to Mark Reboot's famous photographs of the flower being put into a rifle to protest the Vietnam War. Andy Warhol and Truman Capote are at the factory where Warhol was displaying a painting of the second night owl. There's even a recreation of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper with the costumed heroes at the table in a shot that shows Snyder really does come from the school of Marenghi.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
The goal of the opening was always iconography with purposeful and narrative intent. Once we step out of the montage, we enter a CG-heavier digital world where all that's left is what Snyder deems as iconic. After the opening, Snyder seems almost afraid to reinterpret anything. Instead, he chooses accuracy over artistry. And Snyder isn't misunderstanding Watchmen, he's just misunderstanding what makes Watchmen great. Or forgetting. The opening sequence shows he absolutely could have made an original, interpretive, thematically rich film. But instead, the movie becomes a shrine to the source material, worshipping the details instead of adapting them. The dirty secret about Watchmen is that a direct adaptation is impossible. The comic's power comes from its structure, symmetrical chapters, parallel narratives, visual symbolism, and comic within a comic interludes. Its format is part of its identity. Translation requires creativity, not literalism. This is why the opening works. It adapts the spirit of the comic, not the text. Which is also why Damon Lindelof's Watchmen miniseries was such a success. Lindelof knew and understood that to make Watchmen, you had to tackle the ideas and spirit of the series. Of all of Moore's work, Watchmen may be the most iconic, but it's also one of his slightest plotted. The Watchmen opening is a masterpiece. It's the best scene in the movie by a country mile. It's even arguable that it's the best thing Snyder has ever directed. But it's also a preview of a movie that never actually arrives.
You know how everything in this world fits together except people.
Instead, those first 5 minutes become a kind of cinematic false promise, a glimpse into an adaptation that could have been daring, bold, interpretive, and genuinely original. An adaptation that just doesn't recreate the story, but interprets the world. An adaptation that takes risks and understands that faithfulness isn't about accuracy, it's about meaning. The opening sequence sets up a version of Watchmen that blends comic book iconography with cinematic imagination until the rest of the movie retreats back into safe literalism. And that's the tragedy. Because for one shining moment, Zack Snyder showed he knew exactly how to translate Watchmen into something incredible. He just didn't follow through. So what do you think? What other movie started with a promise to you it just couldn't follow through on? Let us know down in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching Nerdstalgic.